What's up, everyone? It's Wacka. Welcome you to a different kind of video this week. For New Year's, I decided to start making some um, different content. I've done some in the past, but it's very sparse out. And I think the last time I made a video that wasn't like a weekly recap or just like me playing in a different league. It's probably been since my Mega video, and I don't actually remember when I made that. I have a feeling it was more like early 2024, maybe like mid 2024. I talked about some Mega Evolutions, so I'm actually not going to talk about any of them in this video. Um, I did have a poll up so people can submit some things that they believed fell off in Draft League going into Gen 9 or just like throughout Gen 9. So yeah, and just a disclaimer, I'm not saying any of these videos. I'm not saying that any of these Pokemon are bad, but they, I believe, have definitely fallen off, and I think a few people have agreed. My sample size wasn't very large, but I do have enough Pokemon to kind of talk, and I do agree with like most of them. So getting into things, you're gonna see like the first few here, but it's fine. I'll talk about them. Anyways, our first one we have is Baxcalibur, which I believe this is like the only Gen 9 Pokemon on this list. I understand why it was submitted, but I'm probably not going to say that it has like fallen off in any way. In fact, I think it's been pretty much the same throughout the generation. If anything, I think I overrated it quite a bit. This is one of the mons, like it got banned from Ubers, as you can see, and in the early generation, like all it had was like Dragon Dance, along with like Glaive Rush, Icicle Crash, and like either like Earthquake or Shard, and that was kind of like all it did. Its ability is cool. It has Thermal Exchange, which means that its attack is raised by 1 if damaged by fire moves, and it can't be burned, which is very nice for a physical attacker. It also has like pretty surprising bulk. But comparatively, this thing is pretty much just a worse Kyurem at this point. It does have a higher attack stat, but it is lower in speed, and like surprisingly, its bulk is actually worse. Like I believe if I compare it to Kyurem, like Kyurem has base 125 HP in both 90s and both defenses, which is pretty much the same as Baxcalibur with less HP. But what Kyurem does better is like loaded dice sets, which I mean Baxcalibur can do too, because it gets access to Scale Shot now, which it really needed as a buff, and it even gets like Sword Stance, which I don't think Kyurem does. But in Gen 9, I think the meta is just too fast for a lot of mons to click like Sword Stance, Scale Shot. There are definitely some mons that can click like Sword Stance, Trailblaze, but they definitely need like that Terra, and Dragon Ice just isn't a good defensive typing to really run like Sword Dance, Scale Shot, so I understand why it was submitted, but I would kind of disagree that it's fallen off. I feel like it's been around the same ever since its introduction. If anything, it's gone up like a little bit, but I haven't really seen anyone use it simply because I think Kyurem is just better than it. So what my actual first submission is, and I don't think anyone actually said this one, I think it's Obstagoon. I think ever since Ursaluna was released, Obstagoon has become obsolete. It does have some cool things with like Obstruct. I've done some Obstruct tactics to, let's say like First Impression Slitherwing, and then Facade kills it. I get off my burn for free. And it's fast. It is definitely faster than Ursaluna. But its attack stat is 90, which is just very weak compared to like Luna's 140. And I think at this point, people are just used to like Ursaluna's clicking Facade and just killing things. But as someone that has used Obstagoon in the past, and I've used him pretty well, it's won me a chip before. I don't know. I've only used it like 3 or 4 times, which I think is more than like most people have used it, because I think this is very overlooked. It's still kind of a good bulky normal type, though. It gets Parting Shot, obviously it gets Facade, it gets Knockoff, which, yeah, and then to hit like steals, you get close combat and stuff. So it's not a bad option, but I would say Ursaluna's presence merely has just making people think like, oh, Obstagoon just probably isn't that good anymore. And I kind of understand that sentiment. Its stat spread is pretty good, all things considered, but the power creep I definitely think has kind of overpowered it a little bit. I think there's just simply stronger Pokemon now, so Obstagoon just isn't seeing a lot of use. So yeah, that will be that submission. Excadrill was submitted by someone. I don't remember who. It might have been me. I did my own submissions, but I can't remember which ones I actually said. But I definitely agree with Excadrill. As someone who's used Excadrill as a mascot pick in the past, I think my first ever team name was the Detroit Drills. I tried drafting Excadrill like 2 or 3 times, and I think each time I used it, it just wasn't that good. And comparatively, I wasn't pairing it with Tyranitar, but even at this point, Tyranitar's not as good. And I'll actually talk about Tyranitar in a second too. Drill does have some good things. Obviously, like Stab Earthquake with 135 attack is just going to be very good. And it gets like Iron Head, but it is really reliant on like clicking. Well, it doesn't even get Stone Edge, so it's like really reliant on like Rock Slide to do things against a lot of flying types. It's definitely really walled by like Corv and like Celesteela and Skarmory, which like you usually see those drafted like all the time. It's really weak to like foul play, so if you're facing like a Mandibuzz just clicks foul play and you kind of die. Drill's defense isn't really that great. It's 60-65. Its HP's alright, but it's not like the best. And all in all, Drill just kind of isn't as good, and I think in general Sand is just not very good anymore. Especially because the next Pokemon I'm going to talk about is Tyranitar. This Pokemon has also gotten a lot worse. There's just a lot of high tier fighting types that destroy it, and a lot of fighting coverage that kind of destroys it. It's pretty slow, even after like a Dragon Dance. If you're trying to run like a Dragon Dance set, it's kind of just not good. It did get access to Knockoff too. And I would say like some of its sets are pretty good still, and like you can run special on it with its 95 special attack. But people just aren't drafting Sand anymore in Gen 9. I think Rain has become a lot more popular in draft, especially now that like Overquill is released, because Overquill kind of breaks through those like grasses that Rain couldn't do before, and access to boots means that like Excadrill isn't able to like, you know, get up rocks and then just chip things down over and over again. So I think overall Excadrill, like, it used to be like 16 points, but now I just don't see it get drafted anymore. And I've seen leagues put it like pretty low and still go like undrafted. And again with like Tyranitar, its typing is just not great. It is still, I think, the best Sand setter. Comparatively, I think Hippowdon and Gigalith aren't that great either. I consider putting Hippowdon in this video too, but I didn't really have too much to say about Hippowdon other than like it just seems like worse than Ursaluna and like Ursaluna Blood Moon bulk wise, and it's just not the best Sand setter, so I thought it was pretty self-explanatory. Next Pokemon I want to talk about was Gengar. This one's pretty easy for me to talk about. I think Gengar is simply just worse Zoroark Hisui. They have about the same speed, and yes, Gengar is stronger and I guess bulkier if that matters. I will say Gengar's bulk, like, it's really bad, but there's instances where I think Gengar can like eat like some weird hit from something. Like it can switch in like once if you need it to, and it has like good coverage. It has Shadow Ball, Sludge Wave, Sludge Bomb, Dazzling Gleam. Kind of seems like it still relies on like Focus Blast quite a bit to do things, and I've also seen some interesting sets with like Encore Destiny Bond, which is very interesting. I don't think Zoroark Hisui can do that, but Zoroark Hisui is simply better because of Disguise. So you're always making your opponent like is this, you're making them think like, is this Zoroark? Is this, I don't know, what does Zoroark disguise as? Like King Gambit, I guess. Because that's what I disguise it as quite a bit. So at least it's having like that kind of mind game play, whereas Gengar comes in and you're like, oh, it's just Gengar. And I simply think Zoroark Hisui's coverage is better. Even normal Ghost type is better at this point. And Gengar losing Levitate for Curse Body definitely didn't help it. Curse Body is, I think it's an underrated ability, but it's definitely not like amazing. It's still 30% chance, and I mean, if you can get Scald Burn, you can get Curse Body, and I feel like I see that quite a bit. But it's just not as reliable as Zoroark. So for that reason, I think Gengar's fallen off quite a bit. And I should have put its other counterpart like up here. I think it might be later in the video. Next one is something I also... I'm gonna put like a little disclaimer on. I'm not gonna say it's like bad or it's like fallen off technically. Like technically, yes, it has fallen off because Protein is just worse now. Changing your type once just means like, I don't know, it's just a lot easier to deal with, and there's no reason to really run Torrent. I mean, I think there's like some niche cases you can use Torrent, but for the most part, you're going to be use Protein or Battle Bond, and the way Battle Bond works now is different as well. And I don't know, it just made Greninja allowable in leagues the way that they have changed some of these things, and Ash Greninja is not existent anymore. But I will say, I'm not the one that put Greninja on here. I'm just kind of putting it on here because it was submitted. And I do want to talk about it, like, overall, I think even people are agreeing as a Protein mon that, like, Meowscarada is better. I don't want to type it in because I don't feel like I need to talk about Meowscarada. But Meowscarada being, like, 1 speed point faster is very useful for it. Oh, you can't even see its speed. Well, shoot. That's fine. It has 122. I think most people know that. And it does have some cool options. I think it got access to like Swords Dance in this gen. Does it have Nasty Plot? No Nasty Plot. But yeah, it has like Swords Dance, and I've seen some physical Grens kinda lately, but its offensive stats just aren't amazing, and its bulk isn't that great. So it's mostly reliant on like its speed and just the raw power of its moves. It seems like it needs to run Hydro Pump in order to, it needs to run Hydro Pump like in order to do like a lot of damage. And yeah, I guess I see why it was on the list, but I wouldn't say it's like bad. I do think it's still like a 17-point mon probably. And it's still pretty okay at like cleaning games. It's just not like everyone's play style, I think. Scissor, someone submitted Scissor, and I was thinking about Scissor quite a bit. I'm not really sure I agree with it, but I would say Scissor isn't as, it's not drafted as much as it used to be in Nat decks. And by the way, this is all in like the context of like Nat decks. So in Nat decks, I mean, you have Mega Scissor too, but I think regular Scissor got like access to close combat in this gen, which really helped it not have to run like Superpower. Now they are the same base power, but Superpower has less, or Superpower just has more drawbacks. Bullet Punch is still good, and I think Quick Attack is good. I think simply people haven't used it as much, especially in like Palkia decks, because it lost like Roost and Defog. And in general, I think Defog is worse. I don't know if people really use Scissor to click Defog. That's what I used it for, like back in Gen 8. Like most of my sets ran Defog if I needed to run Defog, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure if I agree with the Scissor. It does seem a little bit less splashable on teams now that there's some better like fire types on the board, like Gouging Fire, Iron Moth, and there's like other steel types too that you can draft. Yeah, I don't have too much else to say about Scissor, but it was submitted. And if someone wants to leave a comment as to like why they put Scissor on that list, please feel free, but I don't know if it's really fallen off. But this one's pretty easy. I think Victini's like easily fallen off quite a bit. I don't think its price has gone down too much, but I think it potentially could. Simply like based on hundreds just aren't as good as they used to be. Um, Gen 9 really like pushed like the stat spread like over the edge. Um, and it just isn't, it just doesn't seem as strong. And yes, it does have high base power moves like V Create and Blue Flare. Um, those are like some of the strongest moves it gets though, and Victory Star is very nice for it. It just seems very reliant on like heavy duty boots to get things done, especially in like a hazard stack meta. So like you typically don't want to just like choice Scarf or choice Bandit or Specs anymore because you kind of have to run boots versus like all the spike spam and like the stealth rock spam. Because I think in Gen 8 like there was stealth rock, it was pretty prominent, but now there's like spikes and like sticky web is a lot more common, I think. And then another reason it's a little bit worse is definitely its psychic typing is holding it back. There's so many like new dark types in this gen, like Tinglu, Qianpao, Qiyu, like yeah, the Ruinous Quartet, Meowscarada, and they're all very good too, except I guess Wochien. And there's probably some others that I'm just not thinking about right now, but they are definitely a lot better, and because of that, they're getting picked up like round one. Like in Gen 8, you'd see like, oh, Persian's your dark type. Alolan Persian's your dark type. But now we're seeing like, Crook isn't even getting drafted anymore, and I think Crook is on this list, but simply like there's just a lot of round one, round two dark types, and dark is just a lot better of a type now in Gen 9. So most psychic types have just kind of fallen off. If Victini was like pure fire, I think it would be fine, but psychic fire is just not a good typing really, especially on a mon that's like base 100 isn't fast enough anymore. Now we have Rillaboom, and Rillaboom I guess is a very obvious case where simply it's just Grassy Glide is weaker now. And pure grass as an offensive typing just isn't very good. It's so easy to find like a 4 times resist, or you know, just like a flying type that walls it and can just like roost up as it has to U-turn out. And like Rillaboom does have knockoff, and I think Woodhammer is really good. But if you're gonna do anything with Rillaboom, like you have to run Woodhammer to do damage because it just doesn't do enough damage anymore. As a damage dealer, I guess, but it's still a good support mon. Grassy Terrain is really nice, and it's good for supportive options. But I would say like it's definitely fallen from a round 1 or round 2 pick. I typically see Rillaboom picked like round 4 or 5 now, and it's definitely fallen from like 15 or 16 points to like 12 or 13. Maybe 14, but Power Creep has made it lower, especially, and then like Grassy Glide has made it a little bit lower. So it's a little bit unfortunate for Rillaboom, but it's pretty obvious as to why it's fallen off. Then we got Kartana. I don't know who submitted Kartana, but I think it was a very interesting submission. And I think most of it is due to being absent from Gen 9, if that makes sense. It is a good Terra captain in leagues that allow like higher tier Terra, like SDS this season, for example. But because it's not in Gen 9, it does not get Terra Blast. It does have coverage though, like knockoff Sacred Sword plus stabs. Like that's pretty much all you're gonna run most of the time. But you probably want Terra just to kind of like boost your offense or get like another coverage type. I think I used to see like Terra Fighting make Sacred Sword like 2-shot things, like it's a really stupid example, but like Terra Fighting Sacred Sword is the only way you're gonna break through Crocolore, for example. But I think simply just not being in Gen 9 means like it didn't get a lot of good Gen 9 tools that it would have been really cool with, like Trailblaze. Kartana, like if Kartana got Trailblaze, it would have been really good. And another reason is definitely its speed tier. 109 is still good, but it's kind of in that limbo where at this point you kind of have to scarf it every week, or else you're just not fast enough because you're just going to get revenge killed easily or like pivoted in on. And I think people are just building around Kartana better as well. with like Rindos and like having a switch into its coverage. Like it's very easy, I think, to switch in on, or if you have like the tools. And if it's not easy to switch in on, like you just kind of live a hit if you can, and then you kill it with a special move, because a lot of power creep is just allowed it to not live any more hits on the special side. If it was in the first place, which I'm 31 special defense, I don't know if you were living any hits in the first place, but it definitely can't now. And speaking of not living hits, we have Alakazam. This mon was like 14 or 15 points when I started playing in Gen 8. And it's been pretty high up for a while. I don't see this thing getting drafted. SDS put it at 9 points and it still went undrafted. And kind of like Kartana, it's just another one of those mons where it's not in Gen 9. So people haven't really seen it too much lately for not getting like buffs. And I think a lot of interesting Pokemon have gotten buffed. Like a lot of the water grounds got both spikes and rocks. So like it's just kind of new toy syndrome. Like a lot of people want to use like Gastrodon and Quagsire right now. But Alakazam got nothing. And it didn't get Terra Blast. So it basically is still very reliant on Focus Blast. Otherwise, like Terra Fighting, Terra Blast could have been really good. And it does have a good ability with Magic Guard. It's really good with like Life Orb or Focus Sash. That's not how you spell Focus Sash, but like you can still okay with it, but it's definitely a little bit less reliable. And in total, like Psychic is becoming less of an offensive type, or like it's less offensively pressuring because there's so many good dark types now. And Alakazam just simply doesn't have like the tools. Even its speed, like for a mon this frail, like it needs to be faster or it needs to be stronger or both. And Alakazam just doesn't really keep up anymore, unfortunately. So the next one I want to talk about was Hydreigon. Hydreigon really hasn't fallen off like too much, but I would say in a generation where they introduced like Roaring Moon as like a dark dragon sweeper that's faster and stronger. Say like Hydreigon's special attack and attack were swapped, Roaring Moon would be just better. Hydreigon still, like, it has 92 HP, 90 in defenses. But it's simply, I think, just too slow, and they really needed to give it like agility. I think agility would have made it good. But it's not. There's also just a lot more like fighting, and there's a lot of offensive ices that were introduced in this gen. A lot of ice types got better, like Kyurem, Baxcalibur, Iron Bundle, for example. Like a lot of them got introduced, and Hydreigon like has to face a lot of them now. And there's a lot of fairies introduced, like Iron Valiant. There's a lot of fightings, again Iron Valiant. So I think Hydreigon is just kind of fallen off, and it's a little bit slow. It's still like a Scarfer, but like in most cases, 125 special attack isn't strong enough to break a lot of things. I've seen Hydreigon struggle to beat like Clodsire and stuff like that, but unless you're clicking like Draco versus some of the unaware mons is very cool, but I think there's a lot of darks and a lot of dragons that are just better than it, so Hydreigon tends to get overlooked, and it's definitely fallen off because it's just not immediately as threatening. It did get access to like Stealth Rock in this gen, which is cool. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about Hydreigon. I use this thing all the time. It's a really good Terra Captain as well, but again, it's just not as good anymore. Anyways, where am I at? Next one I'm going to talk about is Terrakion. I could slot Iron Boulder in here too, because I think... No, I don't think they're the same, or like they suffer similar things at all. Terrakion is just very... its speed is 108, and its attack is 129, which is good, but it's not like breaking or sweeping very well, and it has very unreliable moves such as Stone Edge. Um, like you have to run like these three moves most weeks. Sacred Sword just isn't strong enough. I've seen people use Sacred Sword and just not KO anything. I've even seen them use Rock Slide, and I've seen Rock Slide miss. And I think in Gen 9, just having unreliable moves makes you a lot worse. Like, I think if this thing had Mighty Cleave, it would be fine. But having a stab that's so unreliable, like, if you miss a move, you're kind of just losing a lot of momentum. Especially in instances where, like, you have to land these moves or else you kind of die. Um, Justified's still a good ability, like, it can switch in on dark moves. But like you kind of have to like choice Scarf it or choice Band, and I feel like Tracheon's old choice of item would have been like Life Orb, but Life Orb as an item is also like not as good anymore. People are preferring like Expert Belt, so it's just kind of fallen off in terms of power, and I think there's just better options than it. And it might have even been overrated from Gen 8, to be honest. Just seems like one of those Pokemon that seems like people have overrated it for quite a while and then have realized like, oh, it's not that good. But yeah, and I could say like Iron Boulder has fallen off quite a bit too. It's only been out for like a year, so I can't really say too much else about it. Going into some defensive mons now, we have Toxapex. I'll put the Regenerator on it. Pex is a very mon. Its HP is 50 and it has good defenses. Comparatively, like Rotom has like a 50 less in like both defenses. It's just that Pex is very passive and it's just a sit there do nothing mon. So a lot of mons I feel can just kind of set up on it. Even though Pex like it does get haze, not hail. Well, it does get hail, I guess, but haze. But it just seems like, oh, if you want to like Swords Dance, you're forcing it to click haze over and over, and then you just kind of eventually break through it, either with a crit, or you're just doing like 60%. It's clicking haze and then recover, and then you're doing another 60%, and it's just kind of slowly losing health. It seems like it's forced to run like boots a lot more, and it's a kind of knockoff fodder. It's just definitely not as good anymore. I don't know, I just made it shiny. And yeah, it needs to run like... You have to run like Gunk Shot now to like not get substituted on. I feel like it's kind of sub-fodder as well. And just doing nothing in a game and not having like Flip Turn to switch out or teleport, you're just definitely worse because you're just kind of a sitting duck in a lot of instances, and you're giving your opponent like free turns to just do stuff. And yeah, similarly to Pex, we have Slowbro. SDS has been looking at Slowbro quite a bit, and I've also kind of realized nobody drafts this mon anymore. And Palliadex doesn't get drafted because it lost teleport. So in Palliadex, it's like very like low tier, low points. Compared to Slowking, who didn't keep teleport, but it got Chilly Reception, which is kind of similar to it. But Slowbro just, I don't know, its bulk is still pretty good, 95 HP, 110 defense with Regenerator is still good, and 80 is a good defensive stat for Assault Vest. And I think Slowbro's best set now is probably Assault Vest. But I think at that point, like, you might as well just draft Slowking and run, like, partial Fizz Def and then, like, specially defensive with, like, Chilling Reception or Teleport. And Slowking also getting Chilly Reception means that it is a more supportive option for some ice types like Kyurem and, like, Arctozolt, which are very prominent in, I think, at least Nat decks. I think people should use Arctozolt more, I think, but you definitely see like those Slowking Kyurem teams a lot, and I think Slowking is just a better mon at this point, which I guess kind of makes sense. Even like Galarian Slowking is good, but they all have their drawbacks, is that they're part Psychic typing, just like Alakazam. Like, you just kind of get threatened out by it too much at this point. And I think the thing that is keeping Slowking and Galarian Slowking up is that they have Chilly Reception, and options like that to do stuff. So I think Slowbro in general is just kind of fallen off because it's kind of swapped roles with Slowking, which I think Slowking used to be worse than Slowbro. So yeah, their roles just kind of reversed, and yeah, Psychic typing, LOL. Now we have Clefable. There's definitely some people out there that will think Clefable is still good. However, if you calc this thing, like, I don't know, as a specially defensive wall, it's not living like two flamethrowers from Chi-Yu. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw a calc where like Chi just Okos this thing, even like specially defensive. It's just very stupid. And it's kind of it's forced to spam like Moonlight, which only has like 8 PP. Wish is good, or Healing Wish is even good too, but yeah. You're running probably Magic Guard or Unaware. They're both still good abilities, but stats just aren't enough to keep up, and it kind of just gets out damaged and overwhelmed by a lot of threats. It has like its good matchups. It's definitely like a mon for like balanced teams. But it seems like Gen 9 is just more hyper offensive, or not even hyper offensive, but just like offensive and like trying to hit as hard as you can. And you're trying to play fast, and Clefable just doesn't really fit this style anymore. So yeah, Clefable kind of falls off as a result. Ferrothorn's an interesting case though. It is 94 attack is actually pretty strong, and it has higher HP compared to like Pex, and it has pretty similar defenses. It doesn't have like recovery though, which I think is fine in this meta. I think clicking recover is just kind of a waste of a turn, but it is like the original, like you get stealth rock and spikes in one mon. It isn't in Palliadex though, so it didn't gain access to like any of the new moves. Like it could have gotten like Trailblaze. Trailblaze wouldn't have been useful on this thing anyways, but if they wanted to give this like a different move, that would have been good. This could have been like a good Terra defensive mon, but Grass Steel's already a good typing. It just seems like it might be a little bit weaker to things. There's some new mons that kind of just out damage it, or like overwhelm it with damage. A lot of the things that it would wall get like fire coverage. Specifically, like a Grass Steel type should wall like a Water Dragon type, but you have Walking Wake who just gets like Flamethrower, so you just kind of die. And if you miss like Leech Seed, you're kind of screwed because you're not getting your HP back, and whatever has come in on you is pivoted out. And there's just other items as well, like Punching Glove and Protective Pads that are more common. So Ferrothorn, like Iron Barbs, doesn't really pop off as much as you think it would probably. So Ferrothorn has just kind of lost value. And back to my point from earlier, Spikes and Stealth Rock are very common in a lot of mons, like Gastrodon and Quagsire, so you can easily get like your Spikes plus Stealth Rock setter in a different mon, and then pick a Steel type that like, you know, isn't weak to Flying, because I think Flying is also very good, and you definitely want like a Flying resist, which Grass Steel doesn't really give you. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have too much else to say about Ferrothorn. I'm using it currently in SDS, and it seems like alright, but there's, again, just so much fire coverage. Like, you kind of have to baby it, like, a little bit. And if you don't baby it, like, you're just gonna let it die. And, like, sometimes, sure, you can just let it die. But I don't know if that's what you want to do with, like, a defensive mon that could be pivoting. Like, even Slowbro with, like, Teleport can offer more value in a lot of instances. Yeah. My Lodic is here as well. Mostly because I think Marvel Skill is not a good ability. In this gen, when you're running Flame Orb over Leftovers, you're losing 12% a turn compared to Leftovers, and then you're also losing whatever damage you take from like having Stealth Rock or Spikes chip when you come in, and then Recover is a lower like PP move now. You only get 8 Recover PP, and yeah, it's not very strong. 100 special attack isn't like very strong, and you don't really have a lot of coverage. Even with Um, Even with like being in Gen 9 where it could have gotten a lot of moves, they gave it a luring voice, but I really think what Milotic needed was Calm Mind. Um, I think Milotic with like this stat spread is very similar to like Primarina, and I think if they gave it like Calm Mind, it could have been like a Calm Mind sweeper, but it just isn't. And you're just losing a lot of HP per turn for Fizz Def, and like, sure, you get like a lot of Fizz Def, but you're kind of just spamming recover the whole time, and if you get crit, it's over. And if you don't have enough special bulk, it has good special bulk naturally, but if you're not investing in it, you can probably just get broken through anyways. So I've seen mons like Vaporeon, even Vaporeon seems to have like gained less like usage lately, but like a lot of mons just get more value just having able to like pivot, and like even if you're Vaporeon or Wish Passing, Milotic does get flip turns still, but it just doesn't have a lot of tools compared to other water types. And I think a lot of teams are even opting for more like offensive water types now as well, like Swampert or something. So I don't really see Milotic get used anymore. Next one's going to be Miltank. And I think Miltank is interesting. It has Thick Fat. It's also not in Gen 9 for some reason, which is weird because I think Tauros is. Well, obviously Tauros is because there's 4 Tauros forms. But I'm pretty sure Miltank missed the ball on that one for some reason. I'm not really sure why. Miltank is just kind of... It is a Gen 2 mon. It has Gen 2 stats. Its attack set isn't very good. It has very high speed, but you don't really need to run speed on Miltank because it wants to do defensive things. So it just kind of depends on, like, is this going to take hits from, like, fire and ice types? It does get Stealth Rock. It gets Heal Bell, which is... I mean, it's very momentum losing to click Heal Bell at this point. But it gets Milk Drink, which also, I think, had its PP reduced. It gets Body Press, Body Slam. Like, you can paralyze things with Body Slam, I guess. But overall, I think other normal types are better. We got stuff like Terapagos now that get picked up. And other normal types, even like the Dunsparce, is kind of better because the Dunsparce at least gets like Glare. So people just don't really use Miltank. I wouldn't really say it's like fallen off. I just think it's seen less usage, and people are realizing like it's a little bit maybe power crept, especially like you can just kind of hit it with special moves, and it just kind of goes down pretty easily, and it doesn't really hit back too hard. Next up we have Roserade. I don't really know why this mon has fallen off, but I would say like, again, it's an offensive grass and an offensive poison, and offensive grass plus offensive poison isn't amazing. They really needed to give this thing like Terra Blast. This would have been an amazing Terra Captain with Terra Blast, like Terra Fire or like Terra Electric to hit like Steel Flying types would have been amazing for it. But they just didn't give it those options because it's not in Gen 9. And again, it was like a Spikes T-Spike setter, but a lot of mons got Spikes plus T-Spikes in Gen 9. I think a lot of people are preferring to draft Quillfish for like Intimidate plus Flip Turn. Roserade doesn't even get like Baton Pass or like U-Turn or anything, so it can't really pivot out. It's just kind of stuck in, and it's kind of easy to counter offensively. It's not very defensive either. It has decent SpDef, but it's not amazing. Like, you're mostly using like Giga Drain or Synthesis to recover, but it's not like amazing, and it just kind of gets like overwhelmed. But I'd like to see what Roserade can do. It can still do like Sunny Day Weather Ball. It does have Weather Ball, which is very nice, and I think some teams could use, like, if they're using like Slowking or like a Sun, I don't know, if you're using a Sunmon, like, you're gonna use like other grass types like Venusaur, so there's not really much of a point to use Roserade. Next one's gonna be Talonflame. I think we're almost done with this list. I had like 30 Pokemon on here, and most of them were the offensive picks. These are more of like the defensive or like utility picks. Um, so we have Talonflame. I mean, if you just look at its stats, it's just not very strong. People still value it though, but I don't really see Talonflame do much. It clicks like Defog, U-Turn, Roost, and like Will-O-Wisp. And compared to like its old days where it clicked like Flare Blitz and Brave Bird, it just isn't very good. But I would say the people that have participated in my poll are biased towards Talonflame being bad, but I think there's still people out there that think Talonflame is good. And it has some good things about it, like Flame Body. And it's very annoying in prep because it is fast, and you're forcing people to run like pads against it. So I don't think Talonflame is like super bad, but I don't think it's as good anymore. And you would probably rather have a mon that hits harder, I think. So yeah, there goes Talonflame. Crook. I'm getting a little bit tired, so I'm kind of putting less effort into this. Crook is just one of those mons where it doesn't have like very good stats. It has like 117 attack, and then after that it's like 95 HP, 92 speed. It's just not very fast. It's not very strong. It has some decently strong moves like Earthquake and Knockoff. Headlong Rush might have made this thing like really good, but I don't know. They gave it Close Combat and Gunk Shot recently. So it has like some strong moves and has strong coverage, but you're mostly using this as like a Scarfer or like an Intimidate Stealth Rock mon. And it does get Scale Shot too. So I think it gets like, it doesn't even get Swords Dance, it gets Bulk Up. That's what it does, like Bulk Up, Scale Shot, kinda. But I don't really see Crook a lot in this gen. And I think simply it's because Ground Dark isn't a unique typing anymore, and everyone wants to use Ting Lu. Crook used to be like a 13 or 14 point mon, but I think simply now it's just like 11 or 12 at most. I think if you're drafting this for 14 points, you're kind of scamming yourself for a mon that comes to like 4 or 5 games. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think, kind of overrated. It does, I think, exactly what you expect, but I think from a mon that would be like as highly placed as Crocodile, like you want it to do more, I think. It just doesn't really do that anymore. So now we got Buzzwole. And I'll put another disclaimer. I think Buzzwole's a really good Terra captain. I've seen Buzzwole Terra pop off a lot. It has a really similar stat spread to like Great Tusk, but I think that's exactly why it's worse. Is it's just kind of outclassed by other fighting types now. And its special defense is not very good. It's very weak to flying moves. It doesn't get Terra Blast again. It's an Ultra Beast, so it doesn't get Terra Blast. But it gets like all the elemental punches, and like those are good. I guess it doesn't get Fire Punch, but it does get Ice Punch, which is nice. But it's just kind of a bulky physical attacker, and it gets kind of destroyed by a lot of like mixed attackers. And I don't really see it get used too much anymore, especially now that like Slitherwing exists, where Slitherwing can do stuff like Thunder Wave, which Buzzwole doesn't get, or Will-O-Wisp. Buzzwole doesn't get that. Buzzwole doesn't even get U-Turn. It does have Roost, which is alright. But it just doesn't really do unique things anymore. And there's just other options, especially Slitherwing. When Slitherwing also gets the immediate power from Booster Energy if you're using it offensively. So, yeah, but Buzzwole is like still a good defensive mon. Like it still walls Tusk, and like it has good matchups into like a lot of offensive picks. Maybe it's a little bit underused, but I also think it's a little bit fallen off. And now we have Mew. I talked about Victini earlier, and so I won't say too much about Mew. It's just its stats are not amazing anymore. It relies on like, I think most Mews do like setup now, because I think the bulky like roost sets with like taunt, and whether to do like Nightshade or Seismic Toss. Does it get Seismic Toss? Yeah, it gets Nightshade or Seismic Toss. Like these sets just aren't as good anymore, especially in Paldea decks where it lost Roost. I think I'm kind of seeing a pattern where a lot of the mons that have fallen off just simply got worse in Gen 9 going into Paldea, even if Nat Dex doesn't really affect anything. Or if Paldea doesn't really affect Nat Dex that much. I think people just prefer other psychic types to do things, and I think Mew is kind of offensive. It's not offensive, it's very like expensive compared to more reliable psychic types, and even Mew is hard to use. And with that said, like I think Mew is just one of those mons where it's hard to use, and it's hard to like, it doesn't do anything exceptionally well. And I feel like I've ignored this mon in prep quite a bit, and I just kind of kill it. So it isn't really that much of a problem. Terra makes it better, but even with Terra, I think like it's good, but there's just better Terra captains than Mew. Next up we have Thundurus, and I think Thundurus is our last mon of the video. Thundurus is, I think, worse than Thundurus Therian at this point. Now, it is faster, but I think simply its stat spread, while it's fast, it just isn't, like, defensive enough. Like, it's not as defensive as Zapdos. It's not as strong as Thundurus Therian. It doesn't get, like, Hurricane or Air Slash. Its flying move, its offensive flying move is Fly or Acro, which isn't, like, very good. So I think typically you just want a mon that can kind of do things that Zapdos does or hit hard like Thundurus Therian. Plot, you can still run Plot, but again, just Thundurus Therian just hits harder. So why would you use this thing over it? If anything, like Prankster Defog or like Prankster Taunt is cool, or like Subtoxic could be interesting on it, but I think Thundurus just doesn't see as much use as it used to, and there's just better options. And yeah, that's gonna be it with the video. If you guys have like other suggestions that I could have put in here, I probably should have made like a different presentation, but I kind of wanted to get a video out for New Year's and just see how that kind of goes. I definitely could have made some better points in this video, but I was trying to kind of talk faster so I can get through all the Pokemon that got submitted to me, and I didn't want it to make it like 2 hours or script a video because I don't have time for that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you agreed with some of them. If you disagree, leave a comment and tell me like what you disagree with. Like I can definitely see people saying like, well, yeah, Talonflame's super good, but I mean, I don't think it's good. But if you think it's good, let me know and tell me why. So yeah, I will see you guys later. Thank you for watching.